So I often get this question from my clients: are they able to receive a gift that goes towards their down payment?
The answer to that is yes, okay, and years ago there actually were a little bit more restrictions on that, but now they've opened it up to where gifts are available for all of the agencies. One of the main things that people don't realize is that the gift needs to be from a qualified source, and then depending upon the program, they may need to source those assets, meaning follow where those came from, and that all stems from the Anti-Money Laundering Act to make sure that these are actual funds, and to make sure that the client is not actually borrowing the money. Okay, you cannot use finance funds. So the answer is yes, but there are a couple checks in there to make sure of that. They want to make sure it's coming from a relative. It can come from an employer. So there's different types of things of that nature. But absolutely, it can be for the entire amount of the transaction now, where it used to not be that the client had to have a certain investment, but that is no longer so.
Well, that is great. Good to know.
Okay.
So from a lender standpoint, what is the difference between a second home and an investment property?
That's a good question, and one that we get quite often, and really was one of the hottest topics between everybody. If you were in the industry, remembers 2008 and the large crash. Occupancy was probably one of the main things where people were doing homes underneath the wrong occupancy. Okay, and the main thing we've recently had is that second homes are now priced differently by the agency, meaning higher interest rate. Up until just this in March, that was not the case. A primary residence and a second home got the same interest rate. So it's becoming even more of a distinction, and people are saying, like, how can I, what does this qualify for? And that also leads into the same conversation of investment property. But to answer your question, I always say the litmus test for people right off the bat: if you ever plan on putting the utilities of that home into anyone else's name, that is definitely not a second home, that's an investment property.
Okay.
And an occupant has to be living there. One of the occupants who is on the mortgage full time in that property with a registered vehicle to the property, utilities in their name for it to be a primary residence. And there's a lot of little things out there, and certainly your clients could reach out to me and we can go into their particular scenario in more detail.
Great. So this has come up recently from a couple of my clients. So if the client buys and closes on their new home, and then after that's closed, they end up selling their current home they're living in originally, do they have to refinance to apply those funds that they received from the sale of that home toward the new purchase? Or
Great question. This is another one because of just we have a lot of people that are relocating and they have trailing homes that they are selling. They go ahead and purchase now to make it easy to make that transition without having to move out, close on that house, move out, and move more than one time. Recast is the word that I'm going to use here, and this is the word that is in lieu of having to do a refinance. It keeps you from having to do any new closing costs or anything like that. And most lenders will allow one recast free of charge over the life of the loan. And if you do multiple recasts, generally there may be some type of fee, but it's usually pretty minimal, somewhere between $250 to, the most I've ever seen is like $500, okay? And so that's much cheaper than doing a refinance. And they also have minimum amounts that you can do to do a recast. I think some you have to be like at least $25,000 or more, or something like that. You have to check with your particular lender. But in essence, you sell that house, you take those proceeds, you call up, you say, I would like to execute a recast, you call your servicer, and they would generally say okay, and then you would send in those funds. They would reduce the balance, and what happens there is all your terms remain the same, but the balance, the payment would then adjust according to the new balance that you have reduced it to, avoiding a costly refinance, still accomplishing the same goal. Is a great thing that a lot of people don't even realize they can do.
Well, great, thanks for that information. Okay. Well, Ryan, so how long after a purchase is finalized and closes does the buyer have to wait to removing mortgage insurance?
Okay, well, first, mortgage insurance would be a buyer that came in and they're still on the purchase and they're put down 20%. So mortgage insurance is required by the agencies. Mortgage insurance is there to protect the lender, not the client in any way. So, eliminating that is something that any client would desire. And it depends upon the type of loan that you have. For instance, FHA currently is for the life of the loan. Okay, so that means that's never going to go away unless you refinance out of that into some other type of loan, a conventional loan, and whenever you did that refinance, you were at an 80% or less loan to value and 20% equity in the property. Okay, so the VA is different. Okay, they have what's called a funding fee instead of monthly mortgage insurance. So that's a whole separate thing, so that's not really applicable. But the conventional is the one where most people find themselves, okay, well, I'm going to put 10% on my purchase. I have mortgage insurance, and there's different scenarios. So, but if the rule of thumb, okay, just to kind of give an answer and some feedback is, you can remove the mortgage insurance at any point in time after purchase if you actually, reduce the balance, okay? And it's actually down to 78% from the value, okay? That's something that people don't realize after that. So to 78 is generally where that milestone is. Now, if you want to be able to have a reevaluation, so if you're in an appreciating market as we have been, you're still generally, most have you locked into mortgage insurance for at least 2 years, 24 months. And then after that, you can request a reevaluation of your property. And so if that goes up, then it would move that needle of where that 78% is. And maybe it moves it enough to where it goes away, or it would at least put you in a better situation as to the amount of cash that you would have to put into it in order to get to that piece. So, really the answer is, if you have the money, and let's just say you were waiting on, that trailing house to sell or something like that, it can happen immediately. You can even do it in combination with the recast. I've seen that done where the mortgage insurance goes away and recast simultaneously. But if you want to have the reevaluation piece onto it, there's generally a 24-month waiting period.
Great information. So once a purchaser closes on their loan and purchases a home, how long do they have to wait before they can take any money out from any equity they have built up?
That's going to be a pretty short answer on that one. That's an easy one. It's usually 6 months. They have to be on title for at least 6 months before they can go in, and then that they will be allowed to access any equity in there. Keep in mind, a lot of people feel like, oh, well, my house has gone up, this much. Of course, that's for an appraiser to determine, okay?
Right.
And it's based upon sold properties. A lot of people say, oh, well, this house is listed for this in my neighborhood, and they get excited. Well, you got to find out what they actually sold for, okay? And then the amount of cash out that is allowed in conventional financing it's 80% of the appraised value, okay? So there can be a lot of people, let's say if you only put down 10% at the start, and 6 months later, your house is appraised, you still can't get cash out because you already had a higher loan to value initially, so the likelihood of getting cash being even available is, a low percentage.
Thank you for that. So at Beech Realty, we work with a lot of seniors, and quite often some of our customers are retired and just have a very small Social Security income coming in. Now, are they able to qualify for a mortgage if they have quite a bit of money or a certain amount of money in retirement accounts?
Yeah, that's something that is another thing that in our area, as people are trying to make the transition, they may have a trailing house and maybe doing that where they're purchasing this one initially and still holding on to that to make everything easy as far as the move goes. And because they didn't have two mortgages before, their fixed income was fine for what they had, and they only pulled what they needed, even though they may have larger assets in some other type of an IRA, 401k, whatever it may be. And in those instances, there's two different ways to utilize those assets and convert them into income temporarily in order for them to go ahead and qualify for that second home. And we do that quite often through one would be asset depletion, okay? And that is simply taking their total assets and and there's Fannie Mae has one and Freddie Mac has, and there are two different calculations for it, but essentially you can take that, apply the calculation, and it'll give them a monthly credit based upon that total value. That's one way of doing it. If the asset depletion, which is more conservative of the two options, is not going to get them where they need to go from a debt to income standpoint, then the second option is to actually set up a distribution that is an automated monthly distribution for them to go ahead and set up, and then that can convert that, and you can actually go to a higher amount whenever they do that, because you only have to show sustainability for 3 years of being able to take that withdrawal, and we can do that as well. There's also other things that come into play as far as their down payment amount with being able to do asset depletion, your age. In order to do those things, you can't have penalties, so you need to be at least 59 and a half or older,
Right.
and some other things. But in the scenario that you outlined, that would be the first thing I would look to whenever I saw small income but large assets on a retired type of person, in order to get them where they need to be from a debt to income standpoint.
Well, great. Well, you've been very helpful answering many questions for us. Your knowledge of the industry is tremendous, and we very much appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, and look forward. If anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to give me a call.
Great. Well, that concludes our blog session today with Ryan Heinemann of the Heinemann team with American Security Mortgage. And Ryan, what's the best way for one of our viewers to get a hold of you if they have any questions at all about the loan process?
Yeah, well, thank you again, Scott. My cell phone number is generally the best way to get a hold of me, and that is 843-602-6861, or of course email, and I believe this is going to be published on the bottom of the screen as well, which is rheinemann@1asmc.com, and we look forward to doing business with you in the future.